as Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. Let's start with the goal. I think the goal can be captured in two simple statements: to be the supplier of choice to the business and the employer of choice to your staff. Now, by supplier of choice to the business, I mean more than leading a strategic project such as digital business. I mean more than leading an important project such as hybrid cloud or ERP or anything like that. What we need is a continual stream of strategic projects, day after day, forevermore. How do we design this organization to deliver an ongoing stream? Your job is not that of super project manager. It should be at a higher level. And by employer of choice, I mean more than being a great boss to your direct reports. I mean, that's important. But there's so much more to employee engagement and employee contribution than having a great boss. You could have a great boss and a miserable job where more is expected of you than you can possibly deliver, where you're pitted against one another instead of teaming, where the politics are overwhelming, where you're disempowered and set up to fail. So I'm not talking about your supervisory skills as a boss, but something much deeper than that. Two goals: supplier of choice to the business, employer of choice to your staff. And what I'm saying is these are things that you alone cannot do. It's not about you leading a strategic project or two or three. It's not about you being a great boss, although both of those are important. These are not things you can do alone. So the real challenge here is to design an organization that does this with or without you. An organization that prospers and delivers long after you've moved on. The mark of a really great leader is the legacy of an organization that performs brilliantly with or without you. Therefore, organization design is one of the most important competencies of leadership. Now, the scope of organizational design is big. It includes organizational structure. It includes the resource governance processes that I call internal economy, budgets and priorities and that sort of thing, demand management. It includes culture, the way we work around here, methods, tools, and best practices, and metrics and rewards. All of that adds up to the ecosystem in which we work. And so when I say organizational design, I mean all of that. And all of those organizational systems have to mesh to create your vision of a high-performing organization. So let's focus in on structure, because it's really one of the most powerful of those 5 organizational systems. By structure, I mean the organization chart that tells people what they're supposed to be good at, and the cross-boundary team formation processes that combine those specialists onto project teams or service delivery teams to get work done. These are two sides of the same coin. You can't treat one without the other. So it's both organization chart, tells everybody what their specialties are, and the cross-boundary team formation process. That's what I mean by structure. Now, my key message of today is that structure is not about the personalities and talents of the top few. It's not about today's imperatives like, oh, gee, we need more innovation, let's start an innovation group. Or we need digital business, so let's start a digital business group. No, that's so naive. There are many challenges on many fronts. We need to design an organization that addresses them all simultaneously with excellence. There's certainly more to it than these simplistic frameworks I've been hearing over the years, like Matrix, where everybody has 2 bosses, a functional boss and a customer boss, or simplistic frameworks like plan, build, run. Or there's one consulting company that thinks it's just about span of supervision. Every manager should have 7. It's certainly not about cataloging all your tasks and sorting them into piles and defining jobs that way. And it's absolutely not about taking your hands off the wheel as a leader and leaving it to chance, like sociocracy or holacracy. Structure is a science. It's a hard science with firm principles and well-defined constructs. Now, it's an applied science, not a fundamental science. It's an engineering science, not like physics. But nonetheless, firm principles and well-defined constructs. So let's start with the principles. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to touch on the three most important of the principles, beginning with perhaps the one most important, so important that I call it the golden rule of organizational design empowerment. And that means something very specific. It means that authorities and accountabilities match. This is critically important. If you separate authority from accountability, now I'll exaggerate, I'll talk black and white to make the point, but if you separate authority from accountability, then the guy with authority becomes an unconstrained tyrant, no checks and balances. And the guy with accountabilities becomes a helpless victim, can't get the job done, and a scapegoat when things go wrong. This is fundamental to organizational performance. Authorities and accountabilities must match. And it's a fixed sum game. If you have more authorities than accountabilities, then someone else has less. In a nutshell, what this says is we're not going to hold you accountable unless you have the authorities to go with it. Authorities include the decision authorities, especially on how you get the work done. We negotiate the what, and then it's up to you to figure out the how. You're empowered. You need the resources. That means time, money, access to assets, support from others to get it done. And you need information to get it done. Authorities and accountabilities must match. So implications for structure, I'll give you just two examples. There are many. We never define one box whose job is to disempower a peer, another box. That is, one box has the authority to make all the decisions, and the other box has the accountability for getting it done. Similarly, we never separate learning from doing. You wouldn't have an innovation group doing all the creative thinking and then thrust it on a delivery group that just does as they're told. That would violate the golden rule. Now, there are many examples, but those are two that bring it to life. Okay, next. And this next principle leads us to think about why organizations exist at all. Why would an organization of, what are you, 50, 100, 1,000 people? Why would an organization like yours perform any better than an equal number of individuals? And the key is specialization. You see, we all have finite brain cycles. We can only think so many thoughts in a day. We can only read so much. We can only remember so much. So what are you going to do with your brain cycles? You could, like the red, know a little bit about everything. The jack of all trades and master of none. Well, that's what an equal number of individuals would look like, all out there trying to support the business. And you know that is no way to succeed. In the middle of the blue there is someone who knows absolutely everything about one subject and nothing about anything else, the fanatic. And that's a very difficult person to work with because you have no common language. It's difficult to collaborate in team. When I speak of a specialist, I mean a T-shaped person, one who knows a little bit about everything so as to be able to collaborate on teams, but who brings real depth to one field of study. As Thomas Huxley said, a specialist tries to learn something about everything and everything about something. That's a T-shaped individual. Now, with specialization comes performance on every dimension. Specialists routinely outperform generalists. And if you have any doubts about this, okay, God forbid a loved one needs serious surgery. You don't go to your general practitioner, your family medicine or primary care physician for that. You go to a specialist, right? Why? Because specialists outperform generalists. They're better at it. So specialization is the key to performance. It's the reason we form organizations in the first place, is to permit specialization. And the more you specialize, the greater the potential performance of the organization as a whole. Conversely, an organization of generalists performs no better than an equal number of individuals. What do you think of a bunch of specialists all trying to do everything on their own? It would be disaster, right? So here's the catch. You can't specialize if you can't team. If you can't get all the right competencies on a team working well together, what are you going to do? You're going to revert back to silos of generalists because that's the only way to get the job done. Now, this is, in fact, the gating factor in many organizations. most organizations aren't all that good at cross-boundary teamwork. So they deliberately form independent silos, give up on specialization to avoid the need for cross-boundary teamwork, but at least they can get product out the door. And you see now why I say the word structure has to include both org chart, which determines people's specialties, and that cross-boundary team formation process that puts the right specialists on every team, unique for every project or service, and builds clear collaboration. I'm going to jump down to the seventh of the 7 principles. What is the nature of that specialty? And here I want to share with you an experience I had many years ago. I went down to work with a client, a CEO in Guatemala. And while I was there, he was also an adjunct professor at the business school. And we went over and met with a bunch of professors and top entrepreneurs in the country. And Guatemala is a very entrepreneurial country. It's really fun to work down there. So I said, okay, professors, you be quiet for a little bit. I want to talk to the entrepreneurs. And now understand, these people, they were all Ivy League educated. They could have been top executives in any multinational, anywhere in the world. So I asked them, why would you put your family life savings at risk and work these crazy hours to be an entrepreneur? And we wrote down their comments. I want you to look down this list real quick. Like, what do you see here? What's the common thread? It's empowerment, right? They know they're accountable for the bottom line, no matter what. And they want the freedom, the authority to go with it. And here's the other of 2 lists of their comments. Do you see a common thread here? I'd say it's purpose. By purpose, I mean using your unique talents to do something hard, something you'll be proud of, that has value to others. Purpose. That's why they loved being entrepreneurs. Empowerment and purpose. So I ask you, why can't we cultivate that kind of entrepreneurial engagement and creativity and performance inside our IT departments? Why can't we bring that entrepreneurial spirit to each and every manager, to each and every small group? And I'm not talking about putting their life savings at risk. I'm talking about that sense of owning a business. What that means is not designing jobs around roles in processes or responsibilities for tasks, or certainly not around the personalities and talents of the top few, but rather defining jobs around businesses within the business, whether their customers are one another within IT or clients out there in the business, or even outside the business for that, or some combination of the above. Every little group should be defined by what business it's in, what it's there to produce, results, not tasks and competencies. And the implications of this, in my experience, have been profound. It leads to a real sense of ownership and employee engagement. It clarifies accountabilities for results, not tasks. It builds a culture of customer focus. It's essential to empowerment. It builds a high degree of teamwork across boundaries. I'll talk about that more in a second. It leads to agility, that is, being able to pursue ever-changing and multiple strategies all at once. Scalability, an organization that can grow and grow and grow without a fundamental change in its operating model, and a high degree of creativity and innovation. So let's take a look at the lines of business within your IT organization. Let's look at the org chart through that different lens. And I'll start by asking you to think about who's in the airplane business. Is it Boeing? Is it Delta? Well, yes and yes, it's both, right? But these are very different companies. Boeing sells product. They build boxes called airplanes. Delta buys those boxes, owns them, operates them, and sells transportation as a service. Different cultures, different competencies. These are different types of business. So with that thought in mind, think about the difference within IT between our engineers who sell solutions and our service providers who may own those solutions and keep them running and sell service. This is a fundamental distinction. So let me describe the lines of business. I'll go right to left. This is just a high-level framework of all of the lines of business that exist within IT. Service providers deliver a flow of similar things like water from the tap, like electricity from the outlet, day after day, keep things running, keep things stable, innovate, but carefully, only when we're ready. This is a damper on innovation, a conscious damper on innovation to keep things running. Engineers, on the other hand, love innovation. They want to be out there on the bleeding edge. Hey, look at this cool new thing I've discovered. They can run projects brilliantly, but they get really bored when it moves into operations. Next, coordinators bring us together on shared decisions like plans and policies. They don't dictate the plan because we're all empowered entrepreneurs. They bring us together and orchestrate a process where we come to consensus on the plan or on policies, on shared decisions like that. Sales and marketing in IT, that means you might call these business relationship managers, but at a very high level. Their bottom of the T is knowing the client's business and the linkage. That word linkage is key. The linkage between our products and services, between technology and their businesses. So digital business, that's a linkage function. It's not a new technology for the engineers or the service providers. It's understanding our business strategies, whether that's customer intimacy or product innovation or a supply chain efficiency or whatever, understanding the strategies of the enterprise's business and seeing the linkage to our products and services. That's a bottom of the T in its own right. Not in technology. They're smart buyers of all the technologies. They're not biased toward any one. They're there to understand the business and figure out how we can deliver real value. And finally, audit. These are the people, I guess they're in the business of disempowering others to a degree. They inspect others and report the results to someone else. I don't mean assessment as a service to us. I mean judge us and report the results to someone else. Think about the difference between your CPA, your accountant, who's on your side of the table, and the IRS, who is an auditor. Now, hopefully you won't find much, if any, audit within your IT department. That really belongs off at corporate audit. So quickly, I'll drill down on some of these. Service providers keep things running. Those split into two categories, asset-based and people-based. Asset-based service providers are all of your infrastructure operations. They own the infrastructure, and I mean that in the plain English sense. It is their property. They have all authority over it and accountability for return on assets. And they're accountable for delivering needed services reliably and safely day after day. Here's a breakdown of IT asset service providers, starting from the bottom, the data center, and then up through the raw infrastructure services, and then the middleware, and then putting those pieces together as we host applications. In rare cases, we actually own applications, very rare, but we own applications and sell software as a service. We certainly own interactive tools, end user computing, like Office 360, Microsoft 365, and sell that as a service. And way at the top is business intelligence, selling data as a service. People service providers, again, keep it running, but where the service is essentially provided by people. And the best example of that might be your help desk or customer service function. What we want there is reliable incident management. Keep it running. But it's people-based, not infrastructure-based. There are other types of people service providers like field technicians that support the rest of us, eyes and hands in the field. And the PMO, they don't manage projects. They help everybody manage projects. And our business support functions like IT finance, IT procurement, supplier management, and IT HR. So those are the people service providers. Engineers, well, IT is a really complex area, more complicated than many businesses as a whole. As we break this apart, we see applications engineers. By that, I mean purpose-specific solutions, data object-specific solutions. So for example, financial apps, that's not everything we sell to the CFO. It's applications whose primary intent is to manage data about money. HR apps, primary intent, manage data about employees and so on. Those are data object-specific solutions. And everything else I'll call base engineering. The platforms, that is infrastructure, including everything from PCs up to supercomputers and operating systems and all the middleware that goes with. Same on the telecom side. End user computing, that means tools for thinking, not PCs. That's a platform. Take, for example, word processing. Does it run on a PC? Sure. Office 365. Does it run on a supercomputer? Sure. Google Docs. It's not a platform. It's a tool for thinking. Here's where we have engineering methods and tools like Agilists, SDLC, our development tools, and so on. Ontology, that is logical data modeling and metadata repository, and information modeling, including artificial intelligence, operations research, management science, statistics, and so on. Those are all based, they're data object independent. So we have a whole variety of engineering specialties. And the bigger your shop is, the more you can subspecialize within these categories. Right then, coordinators. Take, for example, architectural standards. Standards are conscious constraints on design for the purpose of eventual integration. We limit ourselves to certain protocols or interface standards so that we can work independently in service of the business and still have it add up to an integrated set of solutions. Now, for any given standard, there may be one expert, probably in base engineering, but there are a lot of stakeholders. The apps engineers have to write to it. The service providers have to support it. And in some cases, even clients are interested if it's look and feel standards. So the purpose of a coordinator is not to mandate standards, but rather to bring together the stakeholders and get them to come to consensus on standards. If they're at consensus, then you're not going to have such an issue with compliance. And you're going to get the best of thinking, not just on the technical standard, but on the implications to the business. So that's one example of a coordinator whose job is not to decide, but to orchestrate our consensus. IT business planning, that is both the operating plan, which leads to the budget each year, and the strategic plan. I don't mean translating clients' strategies into IT projects. That's got to go on all year long, but rather our strategy for IT as a business within a business. There again, we're all empowered entrepreneurs. We've all got to have some say in the plan. So this is a coordinator function, not something that's mandated. There's a whole list of them. Organizational effectiveness or engineering. That's what I do for a living. Regulatory compliance. Who's accountable for regulatory compliance? Well, everybody, of course. So it's a coordinator function who's there to help with that accountability, not do it for them. Business continuity. Again, everybody's accountable. This goes well beyond asset service providers. Security itself, CISO, is a coordinator function. Why? Because everybody is accountable for their own behaviors, including security. And the CISO's job is to help them get there, not mandate and then take the rap when they fail. And sales and marketing, their value proposition is great relationships with the business and alignment with clients' business strategies. There are a variety of different subcategories within this stack. The account sales, that's your BRMs. They have a territory, meaning a set of business units. Retail is more inbound sales. It's more reactive with the many, whereas account sales is proactive with the few. Customer success is after the sale, making sure they get everything they need. Your business analysts could be in there. Marketing is one-to-many communications like the IT website and our catalogs and brochures, as well as market research, not just client satisfaction studies, but what might be the market for this innovative new technology? Is there value in the business out there? That's a marketing research. And sales support is sales methods and tools. And finally, audit, as we said, is inspecting and vetoing others. So there's the whole model. Those are the lines of business within IT. Now we got to put those pieces together. How do we get real work done? As Chris, you were saying, none of those specialists can do the whole job. The more you specialize, the more you need teamwork. Now, by teamwork, what do we mean? Teamwork means self-forming teams and self-managing teams. By self-forming teams, I mean, you don't have to run up to the CIO and back down to put a team together. Teams form laterally with just the right competencies for each unique project or service. Just the right people at just the right time. When a given competency or specialty is delivered and they're done, they're done. They're off the team. And a clear single point of accountability for the whole. So one group accountable for the whole, clear individual accountabilities for sub-results within the team. And that makes the team self-managing. We now have a clear chain of command within the team, so we can resolve disputes within the team. That is, the one person accountable for the whole has the authority for the whole. And while he or she is certainly interested in others' ideas, at the end of the day, we know who gets to decide. So if you can imagine this kind of organization, how would this actually work? I know this is way too detailed to cover today. I just want to give you a taste of what I call a walkthrough. A walkthrough is a team formation process. It can then get translated. You turn it over to the PMO and they can translate it into a project plan with work breakdown structure and so on. But this is the first step. Even before you scope it and estimate it, you got to form a team of the right competencies. So think about how a house gets built. There's a general contractor who's accountable for the whole house. And that general contractor subcontracts for electrician, and plumber, and sheetrock, and roofer, and so on, right? And that electrician can in turn subcontract to an electrical supply house. That's how the market works. Let's see if we can employ that internally. For every project, there should be one and only one line of business, one and only one group that sells. I say sells, I don't mean money changes hands. I mean figuratively, okay? Business within a business. There's one group that sells that because we have clear and distinct domains. Let's call that the prime contractor. And the first job of the prime is to line up the subs before you provide any estimates of cost or time, because they're all going to be engaged and any one of them is going to add to the cost and could be critical path. So let's take a project through, whether it's a new application or an enhancement or actually any project. Starts out with client is buying opportunity discovery, the translation of their business strategies into a technology opportunity. Where do they get that? From account sales, our business relationship managers. Next, client buys business requirements. Help me translate that opportunity, be it digital business or anything else, help me translate that opportunity into clear business requirements, the what, not the how. Give me a black box that does exactly this, with every requirement driven by the opportunity we're focused on. And again, that comes from someone who's unbiased with regard to technology. That comes from IT sales. But IT sales may subcontract for some input from apps engineering or any of the other domains. Once we have clear business requirements, and I don't care whether you're an agile shop or hybrid, doesn't matter. You still need business requirements as best we can before we start. So the next phase is client buys a solution proposal from the engineers. And that means Chevrolet, BMW, Rolls-Royce, and everything I need to know to decide. Pros and cons, costs, time, risks, everything. Apps engineers at this point have to kick into gear and put together their project team. So they may buy a similar sort of thing for some of the subcontractors, like platform engineering, database engineering, information engineering, and so on. They may buy lifecycle cost estimates from the service providers to include that in the proposal. They may buy project facilitation from the PMO. They may buy an editing service from the tech writer. They put together a team in the walkthrough, and that's how you generate the alternatives and cost them out. Now, at that point, the IT sales, BRM, brings it back to the client and says, all right, here are your choices. Let me help you understand the trade-offs. And the client says, okay, I'll buy that midpoint, the BMW. Okay, thank you. Now we know what it's going to cost and how long it'll take. We can now move into the next phase, which is implementation. And here, IT Apps is 100% accountable, and they will subcontract to pretty much that same team for delivery. At the end of that, it goes into operations, where the client buys hosting from the asset service provider, who in turn subcontracts at lower layers of that wedding cake for infrastructure services. And in parallel, client buys support from customer service, who in turn subcontracts for support from the apps engineers and the service providers. So that's a snapshot, a very high level snapshot of a walkthrough. And so you see what we're doing is using the language of market economics to induce cross-boundary teamwork. Can you see how this kind of organizational operating model delivers all of those benefits I talked about earlier? I think you can see now that what I'm talking about is not just a new organization chart. It's a different way of thinking. It's a mind twist from do to sell, from functions to businesses, from tasks to products and services. This is real transformation. This is not a technology project. This is not just an org chart. It's a change in the way we think and act and work together. Now, transformation takes time and takes investment. A restructuring, for example, an organizational structure project, typically takes about 1.5 years. It's an investment. But I hope you'll agree that it's one of the most important investments you as a leader can make. As your leadership strategy, think about that legacy of an organization that performs brilliantly long after you've moved on. If any of you are interested in crisping up your leadership strategy or thinking about your organizational structure or how you might actually implement this, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you and be your coach from afar, if I may.